Hey everyone, I wanted to do a video on something that's a little bit outside of what I typically do, but being that when I did originally created Psynautical and I started writing, a lot of it was self-development and stuff. And this is somewhat self-development, but it's a review of a documentary. Um, I watched a few when I was really sick in March. I did really like this um, documentary. I think it was well done. I do think um, it is a bit biased. The documentary is called Inside the Manosphere. It's by Louis Theroux. I've not heard of him. I have not seen any of his documentaries, so um, it seems to be well put together and stuff like that. I do have some thoughts because I guess there were some people that he kind of reached out to, but he didn't interview. But he kind of talked about like kind of Andrew Tate and others. I'm trying to remember specifically the people that he interviewed, which to be honest, I'm not familiar with any of them. Um, kind of a interesting, kind of interesting backstory is I used to be, I wouldn't say involved, but it's kind of evolved or changed into what is the Manosphere, and it kind of evolved from kind of the PUA, pickup arts, and like dating coaches and stuff like that. And I kind of moved away from that for a variety of reasons. One of it, which is my chronic illness, that really makes it hard for me to like kind of go out and do things and kind of interact how most typically normal people or even neurodivergent people interact. I do think some of it was edited to make him kind of look better and kind of look the other guys that he interviewed kind of look bad. I know some other people kind of put another spin on it or showed different perspective. Um, my take is, I don't know. I kind of have a neutral, kind of somewhat middle of the road approach to kind of like the manosphere and stuff. Like when I was back, this was before it kind of became really like kind of hyper masculine and I want to say kind of like over the top, kind of toxic masculinity or toxic masculinity and stuff like that. Like all this alpha stuff and whatnot. Which I'm not a big fan of for a variety of reasons. Not only to mention that the person that invented that term later retconned it or kind of went away from it and just said, "Oh, this is the leader," but now it's used in so many other different things, and it's kind of misattributed and misquoted and misused. I think often in the manosphere, that people have to be this masculine and other stuff. Um, I have nothing against people wanting to make more money, especially whether that be a business thing, self-employment, entrepreneurial investments and stuff. I'm a big fan of Timothy Ferriss and stuff like that, and also getting better with like social skills and stuff like that. But there have been a number of controversies with a number of different dating coaches. I've had some bad experiences with some of them. To be honest, I've actually had to block a few on social media. There was one that was really prominent that he was in a pretty popular book back in the day, and while I was a fan of that stuff, like back in the day, I've kind of moved on and kind of have my own perspective. I think especially the people that are more red pill tend to be, um, I don't know, a bit toxic, a bit over the top, a bit more like misogynistic and stuff like that. That being said, I'm not saying that Louis Theroux is, it seems like he's kind of like the opposite of that, which I think is too much in one direction. I think, in my perspective, um, even though I am a fan of like traditional relationships and marriages and stuff, if it works out for that, if someone's able to financially, and even gender roles, without, I'm trying to be kind of careful how I say this, um, is that I do think men and women, they kind of have, there's kind of like a spectrum or continuity, kind of between there's like hyper masculine and there's hyper feminine and stuff like that. And I think even men have kind of a mix of both. They have masculine and feminine. Men typically, I would say, more leaning towards like the masculine and stuff like that. I do think from personal experience and people I've encountered and stuff like that, especially being not only neurodivergent on the spectrum, but also having chronic illness, is it kind of creates a unique perspective, and um, I just see a number of issues with modern dating, to be honest, um, from men and women. It's just kind of toxic on both sides. There's a lot of like toxic kind of crashing, um, kind of insults and stuff like that. And to be honest, I think it's a combination of things. To be honest, I'm not a fan of feminism. But on the other hand, I'm not a fan of men's rights or other. I'm kind of probably in the middle somewhere. Um, I won't say I'm either anti either of them, but it's just kind of a, I would say kind of a mix of both. I mean, I believe in like kind of equality and stuff like that. I do think some gender roles are different. Roles are better suited for people. I think like combat roles, like combat and like soldiers and stuff. A lot of them are more suited for men. Um, I think nothing wrong with women being in armed services and stuff, but I think more like support roles. I just think in an emergency situation, especially strength-wise, being able to carry someone or something like that, it's typically difficult for women unless they're like have a lot of they're very like strong and tall and big. Even then, compared to men of probably the same size, they can probably outperform them in physical ways. You know, um, but yeah, I think it's just like and I've even looked at some people what they post about it and what they think about it. I think it's just kind of a symptom of like kind of a deeper dysfunction in society, um, especially towards men and kind of I've seen a lot of like even during like men's mental health people will like bash men and stuff like that, and I don't know. It's to a point where you really have to be careful of like what you say and do because you don't know how people are going to interpret it or anything. Anyways, like yeah, I just think it's I don't know. It's really stacked against men. I want to say, and you really have to be doing a lot and like become a lot kind of to get better options with women and stuff like that. And it's just very kind of toxic and kind of cutthroat. I want to say. Um, to be honest, I don't really go out that much because most of the time I'm working or focused on my health and stuff. I am trying to like adventure out and kind of open up my comfort zone and stuff. And I did through kind of more so not probably the Manosphere and other stuff has got exposed and experienced a lot of different stuff. I learned more about health and like business stuff. This was kind of a combination of like high intensity weight training, Timothy Ferris, and then some other books, but also like spirituality and stuff because there are some dating coaches that are more take like a spiritual approach, and so that kind of got me into Eckhart Tolle and some other stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think there are some good dating coaches and stuff out there. It's very hard to find a lot of them, and I still follow quite a few of them on social media and other stuff. Is a lot of them have, um, I don't know. It's interesting when you find people that typically are the coaches and stuff like that. They typically didn't start out well with women. A lot of them have like probably some mental health issues. A lot of them are probably on the spectrum, and they kind of turn that around and then they teach it. And so it's kind of a lot of dysfunctional people teaching other dysfunctional people how to better interact and stuff like that. And there are some good people, I think, and I think people that really genuinely want to help. But there's also a lot of, especially from what I recall, people charging ridiculous amounts for coaching and for products and other stuff like that. And I think I did really enjoy there was a convention and other people that I've kind of, I want to say kind of a mentor, kind of acquaintance of mine, kind of exposed me to other things. I do think it's good to take kind of a balanced approach, to not only be able to go out a decent amount, but also work on your health, your wealth, kind of be more well-rounded and stuff like that. But that's just kind of my opinion. That's kind of my perspective. I have mixed views kind of on the Manosphere. I don't, to be honest, the people that you interviewed, I'm not super familiar with. To be honest, I had to kind of look them up and everything. He did kind of have some clips from Andrew Tate and some other people. I think the guy that was from Louisiana. I think I've seen him in clips and stuff like that. It does kind of make him, put him in a bad light and stuff like that. Um, I do think it's kind of, what is it, kind of hypocritical, a little bit weird that they're open to, that these men typically want a traditional relationship and like marriage and stuff, but then they have it open on their side, but not the other side. Not saying that that's not something that I would do or that I would like, but anyways, I thought it was a very interesting one. I think it'll be interesting to maybe if they release some of the other footage, or maybe there was a documentary on one that was someone that was kind of inside the Manosphere, someone that's kind of unbiased, kind of maybe to get a different perspective. I think it's definitely worthwhile to watch it. I wish you would have maybe included or had other people in there to kind of show a better perspective and stuff like that. I do wish there was more like third support. And someone mentioned also, what is it, a lack of third spaces, which is kind of, from my understanding, is especially for men outside of like work and school that aren't like, aside from maybe gym or maybe MMA gym, men to like kind of get together and hang out or communicate or like grow and learn from each other. So yeah, it's definitely worthwhile to check out. I would check it out. I would recommend it. I would say, especially for men, like you can. There are some things like I like some of what Andrew Tate has to say. To be honest, I think a lot of his stuff and even what he's done is kind of controversial, and it's kind of hit or miss whether he's done this or he's done that. But I try to take the good parts and aspects of him and some of these other people, but also learn from other people. There's like so many other resources, like like especially like reading books on like philosophy and stuff like that, and even some fictional, like even anime and stuff like that. But stuff from like Stoicism and Buddhism and other stuff like that is worthwhile, I think, to look into. To just get a kind of different perspective. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on that. I'll definitely recommend people check it out, and then go from there. Kind of make your own opinion and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll see you guys later. I've been trying to be more active. But yeah, see you next time.